Well, I don't know what's happening here, but for some peculiar reason, the stupid YouTube is not working as I'm expecting it to on this computer. So we're just going to have to change to another one. And so I'm doing it through this, so it feels a bit strange, because obviously I'm looking up in the air and so on, but it does feel a bit strange. There we go, never mind. All will come out okay in the end. I guess it's because it's April Fool's Day and everything is going to conspire against us today. So before very long I should drop boiling hot tea into my lap, and that will be nothing but an absolute joy for me. Well, won't it just? Right, if it's one of those days, this is very, very high up, isn't it? I wonder if that's going to be the right thing to do. It's cold and it's a bit miserable, but we shall see how we get on anyway. Okay, I can see if anybody is saying anything, so that is good. I think I might just adjust that a bit. Good morning, Simon. Bonjour. Ça va? J'espère que tout va bien. Put this down a bit. Whoops, all sorts of things going on. Let's see. I think that'll be a bit easier. It's all rather last minute because, I said earlier, right. Hopefully, that'll be sound come back again now. Right. Hopefully, that'll be sound come back again now. Huzzah! That sounds like the sound has come back. Okay, very faintly, but never mind. Let's get going. I'm going to assume you can hear sound is live again. Thank you very much indeed, Orthodox Hancock. Well, can anything else go wrong today? Dear, oh dear. Anyway, Acts chapter 23, verses 1 through 11. Ah, dear. I love this. It's a very good thing to say to people. You have to pray, love, and remember to forgive. If you don't do that, then it's a central part of the whole gospel. Chapter 23. Then Paul, looking earnestly at the council, said, Men and brethren, I have lived in all good conscience before God until this day. And the high priest, Ananias, commanded those who stood by him to strike him on the mouth. Then Paul said to him, God will strike you, you whitewashed wall. For you sit to judge me according to the law, and do you command me to be struck contrary to the law? The answer to that was yes, of course. And those who stood by said, Do you revile God's high priest? Then Paul said, I did not know, brethren, that he was the high priest. For it is written, You shall not speak evil of a ruler of your people. But when Paul perceived that one part was Sadducees, the other Pharisees, he cried out to the council, Men and brethren, I am a Pharisee, the son of a Pharisee. Concerning the hope and resurrection of the dead, I am being judged. And when he had said this, a dissension arose between the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and the assembly was divided. For Sadducees say that there is no resurrection, and no angel or spirit. But Pharisees confess both. Then there arose a loud outcry, and the scribes of the Pharisees' party arose and protested, saying, We find no evil in this man, but if a spirit or an angel has spoken to him, let us not fight against God. Now when there arose a great dissension, the commander, fearing lest Paul might be pulled to pieces by them, commanded the soldiers to go down and take him by force from among them and bring him into the barracks. But the following night the Lord stood by him and said, Be of good cheer, Paul, for as you have testified for me in Jerusalem, so you must also bear witness at Rome. There we go. Good morning, Christos. And good morning, Alec. God bless you too. Then Paul, verse 1. There goes an ambulance. Then Paul, looking earnestly at the council, said, Men and brethren, I have lived in all good conscience before God until this day. Now it's quite interesting. St. Paul is quite clearly very confident in himself. It says in the Greek, by looking earnestly, it means he looked directly at them. He's looking towards the council as an equal towards equals. He's not frightened of them. He's not ashamed either. He makes it clear that he feels that he has done nothing wrong at all and nothing contrary to the law. So in good conscience before God until this day. That does not mean to say that he hasn't sinned in any way. We know from his own writings that he says that he is a sinner. And we know very well, of course, that he himself has murdered Christians. So from that point of view, but on the other hand, he has a clear conscience because of the resurrection. And the high priest, Ananias, commanded those who stood by him to strike him on the mouth. So Ananias is furious that St. Paul is speaking out at all and has taken control of the Sanhedrin by speaking first and speaking openly. And also by talking to them in a very polite way, men and brethren. He is putting himself, as he's done so many times before, in amongst them. So he's one of them. He's saying, I belong to you and you to me. And the high priest doesn't want him to say anything at all, just be condemned. So he sends somebody to smack him in the mouth, to shut him up. Now, Ananias is himself an interesting person. He was the high priest. I'm pretty sure he bought that title between Anno Domini 47 and 59. He was the son of Nedibin, which means the son of the philanthropist, or son of philanthropy. Now, that in itself is quite interesting. Nedibius, because he himself is not known as a philanthropist. In fact, in AD 52, Quadratus, who was the governor of Syria at that time, sent him off to Rome to be tried for acts of violence against his own people. Now, for a Roman to send somebody else off to Rome for acts of violence means that these acts of violence must have been very big. But when he arrived there, the Emperor Claudius acquitted him. This was a man who had made friends with Rome, and he had no qualms at all about violence, and he was happy, therefore, to use violence against his own people if this suited Rome and suited himself. Unfortunately, there have been plenty of quisling rulers like that ever since. Well, in AD 70, because he was a lackey of Rome, a friend of Rome, and a quisling, the rebels, who of course themselves had sticky ends too, rose up against him and assassinated him. Interestingly, one of the strong leaders of those rebels was his own son, Eleazar ben Hananiah, and presumably, therefore, had approved of his own father's murder. So I think we can say he had a dysfunctional family. Horrible man. Anyway, he got a grisly end. Then Paul said to him, verse 3, God will strike you, you whitewashed wall, for you sit to judge me according to the law, and do you command me to be struck contrary to the law? Well, God did strike him, and he himself was assassinated some years later. Paul, of course, is accusing him of hypocrisy. You whitewashed wall. Doesn't sound like a very, very rude thing to say to somebody nowadays, but obviously it was. Interestingly, of course, he doesn't answer this himself, as we shall see in a moment. St. John Chrysostom says that the high priest is rendered mute by St. Paul, by saying to him, God will strike you. He is rendered mute and therefore cannot speak for himself. Whatever that might be, he does not answer directly. In fact, he doesn't say anything else within this particular passage, or again, well, not until Ananias goes down in chapter 24 to try Paul again before Felix. Good morning, Maria Dana, and God bless Philip and Raphael. So it's left to the bystanders to criticize Paul in verse 4. And those who stood by said, do you revile God's high priest? Well, St. Paul doesn't want to do that. St. Paul says, I did not know, brethren, that he was the high priest, for it is written, you shall not speak evil of a ruler of your people. Now, it seems to many of the church fathers unlikely that St. Paul had no idea who the high priest was. Now they say, well, surely he must have known who the high priest was, either by where he was sitting in the Sanhedrin, or because, of course, the high priest would not have been an unknown person. But these were turbulent times, and St. Paul has been away for a bit. And high priests, they come and go, rather like prime ministers in Britain. Was it last year? We had 3 prime ministers, or the year before, 3 prime ministers in short order, and a king and a queen. Hardly allowing the printing on the new prime minister's letterheads to go dry before there's a new one. And as you know, famously, a lettuce outlasted one of our prime ministers. Whoever's idea that was simply brilliant. Anyway, St. Paul either doesn't know who the high priest is, or of course he's talking with some irony, i.e., surely a person who behaves like this could not be the high priest. He might have the title, but what he does not have is the authority that goes with it, or the actual office of being high priest. This is a bad man, and therefore he cannot be God's high priest. However, he does quote from the scriptures, show that he should not speak out against the ruler. So maybe he is showing respect for the office, if not for the person who inhabits that particular office. Now, quite often there are clergy and high office holders within the church who bring their office into huge disrepute. And we might well have respect for the office that the person holds, but we don't have any respect for the person themselves. This is a different thing. You know, to be the parish priest of somewhere is a very high calling. But to fulfill that calling, you must fulfill that calling in every part of your life. Anyway, there we go. So St. John Chrysostom says probably he doesn't know who the high priest is. He's been away for quite a long time. St. Cyprian says he knows very well who the high priest should be, but the man standing in front of him has no right to be high priest because of his behavior. So, as always, when the church fathers disagree, you pay your money, you take your pick. Both of them agree that in his answer and in the subsequent answer, St. Paul is showing a lot of cunning as well as gentleness, because it would have been quite clear to everybody in that room that the high priest, to be high priest, should behave like the high priest. The person whose job it is to uphold the law should indeed themselves uphold the law. And this, of course, is one reason why we ourselves lost one Prime Minister the year before last, in the person of Boris Johnson, who was the setter of the law, but was not keeping the law himself. Disgraceful. Verse 6. But when Paul perceived that one part was Sadducees and the other Pharisees, he cried out in the council, Men and brethren, I am a Pharisee, the son of a Pharisee, concerning the hope and resurrection of the dead. I am being judged. Well, everything that St. Paul says there, of course, is true, but he looks at the people and says, look at this. This lot hate each other more than they hate me. So let's cause a bit of a dispute amongst them. Why am I really here? I'm really here because I say that Jesus rose from the dead. This is something that the Sadducees simply cannot stomach. Let's see if that makes a difference. Keeps on shaking. They cannot stomach this because that's a bit better. They cannot stomach this because, well, let's just say something about these two groups. So it really is a sort of lighting of the blue touch paper here. There are going to be sparks. They're going to be a huge bang. The Sadducees were rich. They were materialistic. They were living in the day. They were powerful. They were aristocratic. They were this worldly. If you behaved well in this world, then God would bless you and your family by giving you wealth, by giving you status, by giving you progeny, by giving you a future within Israel, and your family would benefit themselves by doing this. Okay? So there's no future reward. On the other hand, if you behaved badly and got away with it in this world, it meant that for some peculiar reason God loved you anyway, and was allowing you to behave like Ananias, like a whitewashed wall, and get away with it. And you could carry on having your smart food, your smart cars, your smart clothing, your respect and honor and all the rest of it, your power and your wealth until you died, and then that's the end of it. Nothing, no consequences. And indeed, that is a really important strand within the Old Testament. You find that quite a lot. There's a later development, though, as time went on, that the Jews began to think, well, this is not just. How can it be that somebody who is corrupt has such a good life, and somebody else who is honest and good will suffer? You'll find, of course, a lot of this is in the book of Job. And so a gradual realization came that God is the God of the living and the dead. And the dead are also the living as far as God is concerned. And there is a second judgment, not only in this world, but also in the next world. And in the next world, you are judged according to your behavior, how you have behaved in this world. Have you kept the law? Have you been faithful? Have you been good? Have you cared for the orphan and the widow? You notice the way that it's all about doing things. It's not just about having a sort of belief and putting your trust in Christ or this sort of thing. You do that, but you also behave in a morally upright manner. For Satan himself knows that Jesus Christ is Son of God. Satan knows that Jesus Christ is God. Satan knows that Jesus Christ came to save all humanity, and Satan is utterly lost because he only does evil and not good. So that is the Sadducees. Pharisees, on the other hand, have bought into this latter thing, the second thing. They are educated, they are spiritual, they are authoritative in the scripture, in the law. They really keep it. And they keep it to the point of absurdity. And they are much more in the way of, they are more, did I say spiritual? Yes, they are spiritual. And they are next worldly. They're looking forward to the life of the world to come. They expect a judgment and a resurrection. So they are otherworldly from that point of view. And they're sort of middle-class people. They come from tradesmen and this sort of background. The poor people, as poor people throughout the entire world, just scrape a living. They leave all these fine ideas to other folk. While they make crisps around Lincoln, put together boxes, pack cakes, and other such jobs. Well, they work very hard indeed. They leave all the fine thoughts to others. So these two groups of people, they have time to have fine thoughts. And one thing that's really interesting about them is this. They hate each other. They really, really hate each other. They think the other lot are complete heretics, disgusting heretics. And so often when people are very close, then they hate the other people even more. It's rather like one of the things that always amuses me if you look at so much social media nowadays, is that if you really want to put the cat among the pigeons, then have a photograph of yourself, me, a priest, have a picture of me with, say, an Anglican or Roman Catholic priest, chatting nicely, or congratulating a friend of mine on some sort of preferment, some sort of nice job that they've just been offered. You'll then open the floodgates to the vitriol of the most astounding sort. On the other hand, nobody take any notice at all if I go and have a nice chat with, I don't know, a Muslim friend of mine, an atheist friend, or somebody like that. So take pictures of friends of yours who happen to be belonging to other churches who, after all, are Christian, though they're not Orthodox. I have to agree with that. And I always say I'm Orthodox because I believe this to be the truth, the ultimate truth. But people always hate people who are most similar to themselves. And the Pharisees and Sadducees, despite the fact they're both Jews, hated each other with a passion. St. Paul knew this was going to happen, and he has deliberately done this in order to cause fury amongst them. Ultimately, of course, the Sadducees were completely destroyed by Rome. Most of the Sadducees lived in Jerusalem, and in AD 70 and subsequently, when Jerusalem was surrounded by the Romans, they ended up all being put to the sword or crucified, while the Pharisees, who lived in the towns and villages elsewhere, were able to carry on as normal, basically. And in the deportation to different places, the Pharisees, because they didn't need a temple and actually looked down a bit on the temple, were able to continue with the synagogue worship up until this day. So most Jews, of whatever background they might think they are essentially of a Pharisaical bent, and thus the huge keeping of the law, sometimes to absurd degrees. If you want to shake your head in disbelief, then there are plenty of interesting Jewish sites of various people showing how to keep the law, the Jewish law, without keeping the law. So you break the law by keeping it. Anyway, there we are. Verse the 9th. Then there arose a loud outcry, and the scribes of the Pharisees' party arose and protested, saying, "We find no evil in this man, but if a spirit or an angel has spoken to him, let us not fight against God." Well, this was adding fuel to the fire. It's rather like trying to douse a fire by pouring petrol all over it. The Sadducees don't believe in angels or spirits. And here, the scribes have said, maybe an angel has spoken to him. To which the Sadducees would say, "Shut up, you. It's enough of that. I'm going to come around here and bloody your nose." And that's exactly what started to happen. They seem to have started having a fight. The Pharisee party, of course, noticing that St. Paul is taking their side about the resurrection, suddenly show a shift in their attitudes and have said, "We find no evil in him. Maybe he's right. We don't want to fight against God after all, do we?" Yabu sucks to you, Sadducees. Okay? So they find him as an ally in their hatred of the Sadducees. So you've got this huge dissension. Verse 10. Now when there arose a great dissension, the commander, whose behavior all along, I might say, is reprehensible, he really does need to be sacked. I'd sack him immediately. If you think about the way he allows St. Paul to talk to the crowd, causing a great big dissension, he brings together all the Pharisees and Sadducees into one place, the Sanhedrin, rather than hearing it privately, and that causes another dissension. All his acts, all his behavior has done nothing but cause more problems. Fearing lest Paul might be pulled to pieces by them, commanded the soldiers to go down and take him by force from among them and bring him into the barracks. So the second time round, the Gentiles saved St. Paul. So the two parties have tried to take St. Paul by force into their own group, one lot because they want to stone him to death, the other lot because they want to carry him on their shoulders. Well, not quite perhaps, but St. Paul is in danger of being pulled to bits. Verse 11, and the last one for today. But the following night the Lord stood by him and said, "Be of good cheer, Paul, for as you have testified for me in Jerusalem, so you must also bear witness at Rome." So that is interesting. St. Paul is told that night that he is indeed doing God's will. He has borne witness already in Jerusalem, and now he must bear witness also in Rome. Now, witness is an interesting word. The Greek word, of course, is martyrio, which means to be martyred. Bear witness and be martyred are the same thing. So the martyrs bear witness to the resurrection by allowing themselves to die because they're not frightened of death. And here, he is also he's going to bear witness both in his words and also in the end by his head being lopped off in Jerusalem. Now, what exactly happens in Jerusalem, in Rome, we don't quite know. And we'll come to that when we come to the end of Acts of the Apostles. But there we are. Okay, so I think that's enough for today. But at least St. Paul knows that he's doing God's will. And although he's going to have an awful time of it, really unpleasant, that bitter pill is somewhat sweetened by knowing he's doing the right thing. Simon is almost comical. It would be comical if it wasn't terribly tragic. You know, what the Lord wants us to do is all Christian people to be as one. And there are those who think that even talking and finding out what other people believe, they think even that is sinful. Now, watering down the faith, that is sinful. Changing the faith, that is sinful. Doing something that reduces the nature of Christ, that is sinful. Taking out of or putting into the creed or the scriptures, that is also sinful. But talking to people and finding out what they believe and making it clear what you believe and acting in a decent way towards other people is never sinful. There we go. So it's almost comical, but actually it's tragic. Miss Connie, God bless you. You're late. You'll watch the replay. Well, Miss Connie, if you watch the replay, you will discover that we had quite a number of difficulties to begin with. In fact, at one point, there were 4 announcements that this was going to happen this morning, and then the computer wouldn't work, and then this thing here went silent, and then all sorts of other things happened. And then, as Joan has discovered, I could only get a really wide angle on it. So indeed, this is April the 1st, and indeed, we should surely be made fools of, and I have been made a big fool of this morning. So I now announce that I am this year's grand pandandrum of the April Fools. Okay, God bless you. So that's why I'm so far away and such a wide angle, okay? But you can see that in reality, I don't fill the entire screen. Camera buddies, God bless you and keep you. Nice to see you there. My pleasure, Simon. Right, we've got some people to pray for, please. So we've been asked to pray also for Maria Dana and also for Philip and Raphael, and so pray for them, please. God bless you. And I'd like you also to pray for some others. We've been praying for a little while for Andreas. Andreas was not eating and not drinking, and the day before yesterday he had a massive stroke and is now busy coming to the end of his life. He was expected to die last night, but he is still alive and slowly dying. He's received communion, been anointed, all those other things, of course, which is very good. This is a good way to end your life. He is not in any pain and he is in a coma. So he will die. So please pray for him. Pray that he may receive a good judgment, having died. The second one is exactly the opposite of that, Dorcas. Please pray for Dorcas. Dorcas is also very busy giving birth. I don't know whether she's going to give birth to a boy or a girl, but it'll be one of those two, and not the elephant, like I said to the other day, because she has had, well, everybody in this parish seems to have, if they're giving birth at all, has a habit of giving birth to the most enormous babies. And Dorcas's first child was enormous, and although he's still a very young child, he is a very big child for his age, about a third bigger than you might expect. I think this one is going to be much the same. Mind you, both Dorcas and her husband are tall and strapping people, very, very beautiful. So please pray for Andreas, for his sister, who's Gabby, for his brother, who's Nicholas, who's also very ill and dying. But pray for Andreas, who enters into death, and for Dorcas as she gives birth, and for this child as he or she enters into life. That's very much, the life of a priest. Each day, certainly each week, there's tragedy and beauty, wonderful things and terrible things. Must be like being a doctor or a nurse or something like that. They see much the same sort of thing going on. You see a collapse, you also see a new growth. Okay, God willing, if all these things are working tomorrow, I shall be back to normal size, Joan, and usual way of doing all these things. And the computers will all work nicely. Everything will be good. Okay. Jovan, it's ages since we last saw you. God bless you and keep you. I remember you frequently, in fact, every time I serve the liturgy. And it's nice to see you're still in Tanzania. You only went there for a little while, and what is it, 3 years? And you're still there. So you must love it a great deal. I certainly loved its neighbour, Zambia, very much indeed. And its other neighbour, of course, near neighbour, anyway, Kenya. Okay? God bless you and keep you. I hope things are going well there for you, Jovan. Your prayers for us over here too. How wonderful. It's funny, just thinking about Africa, I can smell the soil. Isn't that a strange thing? Right, time I left. So if you like this, please put a thumbs up. If you hated it, please put a thumbs down, because both of those help with other people finding it. If you want to, you can share it with other people, so that other folk can find it as well. There we go. So I'm going to make you all feel very giddy in a moment, so I have to pick up the camera and turn it round in order to be able to switch it off. Here we go. Bye-bye. God bless you and keep you. What do I do now? There we are. Oh, look. I can see myself many times over doing the same thing.